Morning, everybody. This is Saturday morning coffee with George and Phil. Morning, George.
Hey, good morning. How you doing
Folks,
on
it's
Saturday?
22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself out of shape, need to get focused, unemployed and in transition, or just know that there is something that you are called to do. We're your hosts, George Murray, Phil Connor. Our goal is to help you move from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. We're glad you could join us early on a Saturday morning. We do encourage questions and we'll try our best to answer them. But really, once you know that May 1st, May Day, is our next show's topic is viewer question and answer. So please, you get a question, go ahead and put it in the comments and the notes. And even if you're watching the recorded version of this episode, we'll be able to pull those out from the comments and use those for our next episode on May 1st. Now we only have about 21 minutes left, so let's get started. Today we're going to talk to a subject that's valuable for all of us, differentiation. We touched on it briefly last episode when we talked about bouncing back from rejection. And you can still find our April 3rd episode posted on our respective activity threads on LinkedIn. If you watch any of our episodes and believe someone else can benefit, please share them with others. So George, how should we best tackle this topic of differentiation?
Well, especially in career transition, to be able to establish how to differentiate yourself from the competition, it's really important to I would say, break it into 4 steps. Really the first is the assessment. Currently, where am I at? And then really more importantly, understanding where you're at and where do you want to be. So for example, you may be either contemplating career transition or you're in career transition and you're struggling. The thing is, hey, where am I at? And then more importantly, where do I want to be? You may have been a CFO, you may have been an engineering director, or whatever, but you realize, hey, you know what? That's really not my passion going forward. I want to do this, this, and this, and then make sure you clearly identify that. And then the fourth is really, then you execute that plan, whatever that plan is to go forward. What do you have to do?
What? I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but why do you think it takes people so long to land?
Because I think it's easier said than done. When we take, a look at our previous shows, you have to develop a value proposition because the elevator pitch is dead, right? You got less than 30 seconds. And I think our guests will tell you that we actually had a little shorter than that. And, it really comes off, really unstructured, really rigid. I reference it, the Charlie Brown response, tell me about yourself. And you're like everybody else, want. You've got to be able to be different. You got to be memorable.
So really the first step is just assessing your current state, where you are and how you got there.
Yeah, I think this is where people struggle a lot because, hey, what just happened to me? How do I really move forward out of that? I always call it the quicksand stage or the lost stage, right? It's like, how do I pull myself up? Because again, career transition, if you are, is really tough. It's, every day you've got to motivate yourself. You've got to really set your day, and then you really got to force yourself to take you where you are to where you need to be. It's really kind of in that transition stage, and then finally in that confidence stage.
I think that's fair. I know for me, when, I think we've shared in previous episodes, 10 years ago when I was in transition, it's hard because so many of us, I think, identify with our jobs. We attach personal identity to the work that we do so often.
No, agreed. You're exactly right. You need to go through an exercise to assess the reasons where you're at, and then the good and the bad, and then where do you want to focus on going forward. Each particular, even though your current situation, you might feel, hey, I'm lost. I'm never going to get the next opportunity. You really got to have the confidence, because if you look back and if you've been through your entire life, I'm sure you've had obstacles. You've overcome each one of them. Each one has become better.
I think that's a really great exercise. I mean, diving really deep into all the experiences you've had, how you've interacted with different bosses, direct reports, coworkers, and just kind of owning the whole package, right? The good and the bad.
Yeah, it's definitely important to make sure that you make the next plan in your role, and you've got to motivate yourself. That's probably one of the challenging parts of differentiating yourself, because again, if you got 7 or 8 people, and some are contemplating career transition, some aren't even, and you're going into that interview process and you've been out there struggling, you've got to come off confident. You've got to come off with high energy, enthusiasm, positive attitude. Kind of the 3 things I always tell people to check.
Well, and it's bigger than just getting a job. I know you've shared with me a lot of times that you think that a lot of people focus primarily on just getting a job because they've got bills to pay, but you say that people really should reflect on something bigger than that when they're assessing where they want to be.
No, agreed. And we probably have a good special guest that can tell us, even better how to differentiate yourself. So I'd like to welcome Kat.
Oh, hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Kat.
How are you?
Happy morning. Oh, that's a good idea, Phil. I'm liking the coffee sip.
Glad you could join us.
Yeah, boy, you guys are spot on. Yes, I definitely have some really tactical tips around standing out from the herd, especially around interviews. But I just want to start out by saying you've nailed the most important things. I've got a little story to sort of illustrate how important what you talked about, especially just now, George, that energy and enthusiasm for the opportunity, for the company, for the industry, for the job, that trumps all the skills and experience that you have. And at the end of the day, if they don't like you and don't want to work with you, it doesn't matter if you're the best candidate. And a lot of people don't understand that, or they forget about it. And they're so focused on the technical side of the job and nailing every hard interview question, they forget to smile. They forget to be nice to the receptionist. And all of a sudden they get kicked out of the process and they don't understand why. So spot on all of that. But yeah, so let me start with a little story, because everything I've learned about interviewing, I came by, they were hard-won lessons. When I was 24, I got a job as a rookie recruiter at a global IT consulting firm. All I had to do was find some candidates, check the boxes, make sure they had the right skills and experience, and send them off for interviews. Well, that's what my boss told me, and it was a disaster. Only 30% of my candidates were getting offers. And I didn't understand. I was doing what my boss told me to do, checking all the boxes, making sure they were qualified. So I rolled into one of the senior recruiters' offices one day and I said, Scott, I'm going to get fired. My candidates aren't getting offers. They have to go on 3 to 4 interviews to get an offer. What is going on? And he tried not to laugh at me and he said, you're checking the boxes, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And he said, that's just the ticket to the dance. You got to teach them how to dance on the dance floor. What? He said, listen, your clients are going to ask all sorts of different questions. Some of them are going to be about what kind of lion would you want to be or what kind of cat. Just, you can't control for what questions your clients are going to ask. What you can control for is teaching your candidates to be ready for the 5 key questions. So I'll quickly share those with you and then we can talk about them. And then I've got a couple of other tips on differentiation. Okay, so here it is. Doesn't matter what harebrained, wild question people ask you. There are only 5 things they really want to know. Number 1, can you do the job? And just because your resume says you can, doesn't mean you can. Can you do the job? Number 2, do you understand the job? So if you are jumping industries or careers, or you've been at Fortune 300 company and you're going to a startup, they're looking for the gaps. They're looking for your blind spots. So question number 2, do you understand what's the same and what's different? Question number 3, are you at the right price? Now, before everybody gets defensive, this is not about, can I get you as cheap as possible? The question is, can we afford you? Will you accept the job and will you be happy? So that's number 3. Number 4, will you fit in with the team? That's that likability thing. And number 5, do you want the job? And that's where George was talking about energy and excitement. If you don't express enthusiasm for the opportunity, they're going to hire somebody else who does. So anyway, those 5 questions changed my life. I didn't get fired. And my close ratio went from 30% to 93%. In other words, my candidates only had to go on 1 or 2 interviews to get the offer.
That's great advice.
Well, one of the things that I've heard, Kat, and you may be able to comment on this, is that, a lot of times people towards the end, they don't even ask for the job.
Yeah. So some people have never heard that phrase before. What do you mean by ask for the job? Because that's really important.
Yeah, I think towards the end, when especially if they tell you that this is kind of the final round, you go through, a board, kind of a panel discussion, is that, hey, I'm really interested in the opportunity. I think based upon my background and experience, I fit really in line. I think the culture fit is really great. And I'm looking forward to being a part of the team. I mean, you don't have to go and say, I want the job, right? But it's kind of a soft ask.
But you can say, I want the job. There's nothing wrong with saying, wow, I would, this sounds like a ton of fun. I would love to help you solve this problem. If that fits with your personality. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
And just even asking, just say something to the effect of, we covered a lot today, and is there any concerns you'd have on recommending me to the board, or recommending me as the final candidate? What other concerns you have? Get them all out on the table, because you don't want them thinking through after the fact, after you've left the room. Gosh, I wish you told us about this.
Right.
Or her.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's all once you're, when you're prepping for the interview, once you've secured it. But this whole idea of differentiation, I love that you're talking about it, because let's be honest, you guys, there's a lot of talent out there. There are a lot of smart, talented people. And the real trick is, how do you stand out from the herd? And I've just got a couple of tips around that I'd love to talk with you guys about. The first is around, it's not enough to just introduce yourself by job title. You really have to dig in and figure out, what do you really do? So for instance, maybe you're a financial analyst. Well, there are a lot of financial analysts on the market. What if you are really, really good at just taking care of the problems and alleviate, making sure there are no lawsuits, the data is clean, and you just take care of it so that the executive suite doesn't have to even think about it. You're just really good at communicating with the team to get the data, delivering reports that seem effortless. That's something special. You are low maintenance, no hand holding, and you might come up with a tagline along the lines of, I take away the headaches. I've got a friend in compliance who says, I'm the lawsuit preventer. So get to the essence of what you do. And what you really want to understand is your value to the business. So George, let's talk about you.
Yeah.
Tell us one of your proudest, success, was something that you did for a company recently that was just fabulous.
Well, one of the things is that in a couple of jobs ago, the CEO asked me to do a kind of an assessment of the Thailand operations. And at that time I was responsible for the US operations. So I went and visited the factories and gave the assessment after 30 days. And he's like, okay, well, now I want you to go do it. And I was like, well, I didn't really sign up for that. He's like, well, I want you to start in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I had to come home and sell. Long story short, we got over there. The plan was in place. We're trugging along as far as transformation of the bottom line results. We were looking at consolidating, and bam, we were hit with this worst flood in 60 years. No preparation. I mean, we had 6 factories, so I won't bore you with the details, but at the end, we came together, we consolidated, and became more profitable than the previous 10 years history, just by coming together, putting the people, communicating them on a daily basis as to what the tasks needed to happen. And we basically, in that industrial park, we were up and operational before anybody else in our competition.
So you're really good in a firefight, grace under pressure, and drop serious results to the bottom line. It sounds to me like, and Phil, I don't know if you heard this too, one of your secret sauces is you're really good at the people side of it, because you can't handle that kind of a crisis without being good at people leadership.
That's really insightful. And, Kat, one of the things that I'd love your opinion on is very often we're talking to people, and George and I have shared stories of this with each other, of how you come across people that you're so focused on some of that cerebral elements of the job that you were describing. But even how you can differentiate yourself on how you carry yourself, how you dress, facial hair for guys, earrings. There's this idea that I need to stand out from the crowd and be kind of an outlier. but sometimes being the outlier is actually being more conservative and dressing professionally. Any thoughts you have in regards to that could help?
Well, first of all, it's Saturday morning and I did not dress for interview success. So don't wear this to an interview. That's a great point, Phil. A lot of times people think standing out with their wardrobe or an earring or flashy pin on their lapel is a good idea. And it actually isn't. You don't want to stand out because of how you dress and what you're wearing and your beard down to your knees. You want to stand out by how you communicate. So err on the side of caution, solid colors. I say 2 layers for women and men. And listen, if you've got a beard, don't shave your beard. Just make sure it's well groomed. You know, if you've got a bunch of tats, maybe wear a long sleeve shirt. You know, let them get to know you a little better before you show them all your glory. Yeah. So be conservative with your dress. Doesn't mean you've got to be boring, but don't go crazy with it. Great question.
Well, and I think it goes to, again, so often we connect our identity to the job. We shouldn't put our identity in how we're decorating ourselves, you know, how we're dressing. Our identity is who we are inside, right? Our spirit, our heart. And that's sometimes we get distracted and we can say, no, my identity is my handlebar mustache. And the reality is your identity is how you interact with people. Like you said, how you connect with folks.
Yeah. And if you focus on that connection, really focus on good eye contact and doing your research ahead of time, learning as much as you can about the people in the company and let them drive that first interview. You know, it's like a first date. Focus on the connection, finding common ground. It won't matter if you have a handlebar mustache and they don't like it. That stuff won't matter as much if the human connection is there. But that being said, don't go crazy.
Hey, Kat, I got a question when somebody asks, and if you're in leadership or you're going for a leadership role, you know, the common question that comes up is, what's your leadership style? So what would you say, you know, is a really good response to that? Because again, I think you have to understand their culture, right? Because I think at least from my perspective, great leaders have to adjust accordingly.
Absolutely. Such a great question. You know, it goes, so 2 phases to this answer. How do you answer that question in the heat of the moment? It actually happens before the interview. So one of my favorite exercises to have every single person from the executive down to entry level, think about I call them your greatest hits, your proudest achievements in your career. And if you start to write down that story like you did about, was that Thailand? Where did you go to do those?
Yeah, Thailand.
Thailand. You know, that is an incredible story. But you can't spit it out on the fly in the heat of an interview if you haven't thought about it. So you need to take some time right now, wherever you are in your job cycle, and think about your search. What are some of my proudest achievements? What was I asked to do? What did I do? What were the results? And what was it about me? What did I bring to that party that made that happen? And George, the magic that you worked in Thailand, yes, you had the experience in operations and plants and blah, blah, blah. It was I'm sure it was the grace under pressure and the people side and calming them down, making sure their families were okay. That's something special. Now, how do you express that in 10 seconds flat? So think about it ahead of time and then do your homework on the culture. Great example. Best Buy for 8 or 10 years was a strengths organization. They bought it lock, stock, and barrel into Marcus Buckingham's strengths organization, and they interviewed people. They wanted them to know what their top 5 strengths were. They put people on teams according to their strengths. That's the kind of inside skinny you should know before you go into that interview, and think about how your leadership skills, how are you at placing people well on teams? So just a couple of thoughts around that.
Yeah, so thankful that you could join us for coffee on a Saturday morning. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah. Hey, before I sign off, I've got a freebie for everybody.
Okay.
I have
Awesome.
an interview guide. I have an interview guide I would love to give all of you. It's going to help you identify the gaps, prep for the interview. If you want it, all you have to do is connect with me on LinkedIn and put zebra and coffee with Phil and George in your message. So zebra is the secret code and Phil and George in the message. And I'd love to connect with you and I'll send you my interview guide for free. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for doing that.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Well, Phil, that's a lot in a short period of time. I mean, we only got a few minutes left.
No, that's, I think, very rich content. It's awesome that Kat could join us this morning. And we did cover a lot today. And we just ask that if you're watching this episode and you enjoyed the topic, we really just scratched the surface of these types of situations, but differentiation is really, really key. And we want to make sure that when you're showing up for the interview and you want to get that role, that you think about what's the scale that they're using to evaluate your performance, not just in the interview, but when you join the team. What are they going to be looking at, and how are they going to be assessing whether you're a great fit after you come on board?
No, absolutely. I mean, you've got to be able to turn around and differentiate yourself. There's so many ways to do so, but if you get to put a plan in place, like Kat was saying, and really identify those key areas and put the process in how you're going to communicate, prep for it. I mean, I always tell people, whether it's a network event, you're just networking with somebody for the first time, or you're actually going for the interview, it's so important to prep and go down a couple of levels. Don't just scratch the surface.
And then we talked about the assessing where you are, where you want to be, making a plan to get there. But then you've got to measure your results every week, benchmark yourself. How are you progressing towards your goal? Are you taking a college class, continuing ed class? Maybe it's a class on this platform, LinkedIn courses, whatever it is, holding yourself accountable to progressing towards your goal. Because at the end of the day, George, you and I have both said this, nobody else is going to be checking in on you to see if you're successful if you're not doing it yourself.
No, absolutely. So I want to take the time to thank Kat. Just a short story. I met Kat in 2016 when I was in my first career transition, and she was at Career Force. I was just in awe with her, the energy, enthusiasm, positive attitude. And at that point, I didn't even know the word networking. She was talking about it. So it's kind of full circle that I actually get an opportunity to bring her on the show and give her insight. So really appreciate that.
Well, she mentioned her code word zebra. So if folks want to get that free information, the interview guide, highly recommend you connect with Kat on LinkedIn. But the zebra comes from her business name is Arbez, which is zebra backwards, because she's all about helping people change their stripes in their careers and she's got a fantastic energy, like you said, but more importantly, fantastic results helping people get better. So folks, every first and third Saturday, you can join George and I for coffee at 8:02 Central Time, Saturday mornings here on LinkedIn Live. But our next episode, we're pretty excited about something a little bit different. We're going to take your questions and share our insights on things. So please, in the comments, throw in the questions that you'd love for George and I to talk about. We'd love to do this in May 1st, being the day of the worker, as it were. We'd love to have that interaction for our next show on May 1st. So please send in your questions.
Yeah, and you don't have to be in career transition. The question has to be, I can tell you that just a recent article, with all the things that's happened over the past year, people have really evaluated currently where they're at. So they need to be in the job. I think the article stated that more than 70% of people who are still employed are contemplating a change. So a lot of businesses should be prepared for the onslaught of turnover that they're going to experience in the next year. So,
well, and each and every one of our viewers, whether, again, like you said, if they're not in transition, but they're happily employed, that transition that companies are going to go through is going to impact each and every one of us. So we should be thinking about, what is it that we really want to achieve in our careers? Maybe it's spending 20 years with the company that we're at right now, but maybe it's to make a change. Maybe it's to go to another company, or maybe it's to turn that side hustle into a full-time career. Whatever it is, this is a great time to reflect. And George, you've got a tool for folks.
Yes, but here we're bringing what I would consider a lot of great, talented people in their swim lanes. So back to that comment, you don't have to be struggling in career transition, but we've got Rhodium Symposium coming up April 27th and May 5th to really kind of set your next 20 years. Whether you're contemplating your career change, how do I do that? How do I go about that? How do I set my plan in place? Branding yourself, with Kathleen Crandall. If you're contemplating that shift and that pivot to the gig economy with John Arms, as well as, making sure it all comes together on your LinkedIn. So you're driving the right traffic. And then finally, how do you network all that to get to where you want to be? You won't be disappointed. We only got 2 days left. If you go to Rhodium Symposium Live, you can sign up and you get 20% discount by using Early Bird. So
George, before you change the slide, I love the firepower that you guys are bringing to this to help people. But talk to me about Rhodium. I think I know what Rhodium is, but why is the symposium named Rhodium?
Yeah, so the element 45 is rhodium. It's actually part of the platinum group. And what I kind of looked at and saw is that, a lot of people in their mid-career are contemplating or have experienced transition, right? And that's one of the, kind of ties in as far as like, well, where do I want to be in the next 20 years? And you may have been on a path that you created back in your early 20s, right? But you realize now, hey, it's not all what it's kind of shined up to be. So I really want to kind of go this way, and that's where the reference of Rhodium, the symposium, is just bringing a great talented bunch of people live, so that people can not only get information but also ask bring questions. So that's kind of the reference to that whole Rhodium Symposium. It's definitely a tongue twister.
Oh, no, I love that. I think it sounds great, and it's I know it's going to be an impactful seminar for everybody. Folks, if you enjoyed the topic we covered today, we really just scratched the surface of differentiation. And George goes a lot deeper in his book, Hired, Cut Your Career Search Time in Half. If you know someone in transition, or perhaps you yourself are in job search, and you need to order a copy of this book. It's a great reference guide that you can refer back to. Whether you keep it on your bedside table and review it each night, or just make a point of looking at it every morning. But don't take my word for it. On Amazon alone, there's over 50 reviews. Check them out. You make a decision. But I'm telling you, if you want to be hired, you need to buy Hired. It's available from Kirkhouse Publishing. And that may be the quickest way to receive a copy. And you can see that you can get a discount if you just put that code in when you order it. You also can order on Amazon. And if you just can't wait for the shipment and you want to get your hands on an electronic version, you can do that on Kindle Unlimited. However you get your hands on a copy, you will be glad you did. Thanks for spending another Saturday morning with us, and we look forward to you sharing your coffee with George and Phil on May 1st.